Hello and welcome all for this special webinar today. It's called Standardization at 3GPP, and we have the first webinar in this series, and this is the topic is 3GPP introduction and overview of current status of 5G in 3GPP SA, and I am happy to inform you that we have the chairman of the SA, Mr. Jorg Mayer, joining us today. And also the webinar is moderated by Mr. Mittal. So just very briefly about both gentlemen here. So Georg Mayer is one of the three plenary chairs of 3GPP, the standards developing organization which defines 5G. He is responsible for the system and services aspect defined by 3GPP. Currently, he actively drives the integration of the so-called vertical industries into 3GPP and the 5G ecosystem in general. I think this vertical industry topic is quite hot, York. So it will be good to learn from you today and maybe more in time to come. So a warm welcome to you. And also York works for Huawei. He's a published author and has over 20 years of work experience in mobile telecommunications and standardization. And I just learned that Georg is also a German national. So willkommen, Georg.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure and an honor to provide you some information here. Thanks.
And to moderate the session and also open this webinar, it's our, I should say my close ally and senior, Mr. Mittal. Mr. A.K. Mittal, as you know, he's the advisor. He's also a 5G expert, in general, telecommunication expert. Mr. Mittal comes with a long background, and we are very fortunate to have him today. And he started his, long career after graduating from IIT Roorkee, and all his while worked for the Indian government. He has been in the, quite center of, regulatory aspects, working on variety of telecom technologies. And post his tenure with the government, his retirement, he has been working, with TSDSI, and here he has been focusing on standardization aspects, wireless and wireline, and with 3GPP and ITUR. So a warm welcome to you, Mr. Mittal. I hope you can hear me, and if I may request you to take it over from me here and maybe set the context, if I may request you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Sachin. I'm happy to be here in the company of Sachin and colleagues and Mr. Georg Mayer. In fact, this series of webinars on 3GPP and standards being developed there was a long need felt. And TSDSI being a partner with the India EU ICT project, we jointly organized this series. There will be probably 3 more of these kind of webinars. And today's webinar starts with introduction to 3GPP. There has been a lot of interest in 3GPP activities because people have started knowing it after they see the 4G and the 5G, the kind of interest it has generated. So TSDSI also has a lot of new members who are still new to 3GPP, and maybe existing members who's new people who come, new joinees who come and they want to work with 3GPP. So it's being a very mammoth organization and very complex methods of working and creating results and creating submissions which make impact, etc. So it is very important for people to understand what 3GPP is and how it works. So Mr. Georg Mayer has agreed to introduce us to 3GPP working and also to give status of 5G in 3GPP SA and related aspects. And he will cover the 3GPP constitution at the management level, at the working group level, how the standards are created, what are the challenges and other aspects. So without taking further time, may I request Mr. George to please take over and start his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's
you are
see.
you are going to share your screen. Let me just make a housekeeping announcement by then. So we invite all questions through the questions tab, and once you all will finish the presentation, we will be taking the questions from the questions tab. So over to you, Jorg, again, and thank you, Mr. Mittal, for setting the context.
Thank you all for setting this up and for introducing me so kindly. Can you see my screen now? Is that visible?
It's visible, Jorg. Please.
Good.
Go ahead.
Okay, then I go ahead. So what I intend to do in this presentation is, first of all, to give a 3GPP introduction, a very basic overview that we also give to people who are new to 3GPP. On a voluntary basis, we just introduced at a so-called newcomer orientation session. Then I also will talk about the COVID-19 impact a little bit, what impact it has on the work of 3GPP currently. And then we go into a 5G overview that will be very basic and focus then a bit more on what is the work that vertical industries do in 3GPP, and also how they can influence the work of 3GPP. And then in the last part, a little bit more into details, the release timelines, and the current status of release 16, 17, 18. My understanding is you will have a presentation later on in these months about radio access network and about, I guess, also the stage 3, the city groups. So from my perspective, I want to just say ahead, I'm not a radio person. And I know that people usually have also a lot of questions that comes to regulations, spectrum, and so on. I would right from the start say you will not get a lot of information on that out of my presentation. This will be something that Balázs will serve. But everything else, I hope I can cover in a way that you're happy, and we will have question and answers afterwards after this presentation. So the introduction. This is the one slide overview of 3GPP. So we are a global standards development organization, and we are developing standards for mobile communication. Currently, there are 700 companies from all over the world actively participating in 3GPP. So we call those companies that participate, we call individual members. And from that number, you already see there is quite some base or some stronghold in the industry there. We develop new releases every 15 to 24 months and new generations every 10 years. So this is the history we have. We started around 2000 with the development of 3G, and then around 2008 we went into the 4G, LTE, and now since a few years we are focusing on 5G. All these generations are still maintained or developed into the future. I will have more material on that. But that you get a background, we are really developing the worldwide communication standards for the mobile networks since around about 20 years. We not only do these base standards like for the basic communication, but we also go into areas that are related to it. So voice over LTE or IMS, or however you want to call it, that was defined to a large extent by 3GPP, narrowband IoT, and now, of course, everything that comes with 5G. We are organized in a way as you see on the left. So we have 3 so-called TSGs, technical specification groups. One is for radio access, one is for services and architecture, and one is for core networks and terminal. And I'm the chairman of TSG SA, so the middle column here. And we also have the responsibility in SA for a sort of overall coordination in 3GPP. On top of us is the project coordination group. I will come to that in a minute. But every TSG has below it a number of working groups. This is the place where the technical work is done. And what we do is these working groups, they meet up to 4 to 8 times a year and then provide their output that they agree to the plenary meetings. We call them plenary meetings. So these are the TSG meetings. And those happen 4 times a year. So the next one is now at the end of June. And then comes September, December, and then March. And there the input from the working groups is approved and then goes into standards. We are driven based on contributions. So this means if you have an idea, you have to clearly write it down in a discussion paper, in a work item, in a change request to the specifications that we provide. And only then we will discuss it. So we don't work based on emails where people throw in ideas. We also don't work based on purely verbal input. In order to get an issue discussed, you need to have a written document. And we are consensus-based. That means nobody in the room should say no to your idea in order to get it into the standard. Now, this is something where people sometimes hesitate and say, well, what can you agree at all? Well, it's a lot. You see, we have several hundred documents, standards that we produced over the years in all areas of the industry. The consensus means the industry is willing to really go with the solution. And that is the strength that we have in 3GPP. The consensus really means the whole industry stands behind that. So it's not a rough consensus idea as in other standards bodies, but really nobody in the room should say no. Here's again the organization chart, a bit more in detail. Many of the slides I will show you will be sort of a more detailing or repetition of other slides. My understanding is you will get the slides at the end of the meeting for download. So this is more for your information. So I will not go into every slide into detail. But here we see again on top the technical specification groups and below it the working groups. Now, a little bit a different view on the organization is what does it really mean, this 3GPP third generation partnership project? Well, obviously we were founded in order to define the third generation of mobility, 3G. That was a while ago, obviously. And the partners in this project are standards developing organizations from all over the world, namely from China, Europe, India, Japan, Korea, and the United States. And you see them in the inner circle here. Those are the organizational partners. So these are the real members of 3GPP, but these organizational partners, they themselves have companies or research institutes, governments as members. So we call them individual member. And in order to participate in 3GPP, you need to be a member of one of the organizational partners. So in the case of India, the organizational partner is TSDSI. And if you want to participate in the work of 3GPP, you need to have a membership with TSDSI. Then your company can send delegates to 3GPP meetings. We have also a different kind of membership that is the market representation partners, MRPs. Those are more organizations that are interested in the work of 3GPP, that are promoting it. Nowadays, it's a lot of the so-called vertical industry organizations that choose to have this, this status. And then you have to understand that we are not seeing ourselves as like alone on this planet. We are working in very close collaboration with a lot of other standards bodies, the ITU, 1M2M, IATF, OMA, IEEE, the Broadband Forum, and so on. So we have ongoing liaisons with them. We have people that we exchange between the standards bodies so that we keep each other informed. We have very well-defined processes with some of these standards bodies where we have closer collaborations. So what we do under the headline of mobile communication or 5G is not a standalone project that only 3GPP does on its own, but it's really something we are doing in close collaboration with practically everybody who does standards in this sector. Here's again an overview of the organizational partners. I think I went through that. And then here are some of the market representation partners. I also jump over that now. Then just again, the organization chart, and you see the number of participation of delegates practically attending this group. So you see here at the TSG or plenary meetings, SA has 272, so around about 300, it depends a bit. It's sort of an average. RAN is around 400, but then you see the big groups, obviously in the RAN sector, RAN 1 with, well over 500 participants in most of their meetings. So it should be clear from there that the industry obviously is focusing on the RAN side to a certain degree because it's where the biggest investment lie. But nevertheless, the core network and the overall services and system aspects, they are gaining focus, especially now with the implementation of 5G and the meaning of 5G for the vertical industries. Whoops. Meeting attendance, that's just an overview chart. So you see our meeting attendance is practically constantly on the rise. And now we have 7,000, what is that, delegates days per month. So it's obvious we are still continuing to grow. And especially now with 5G, we are growing more and more. Next one is again an overview. Yes, again, our work is based on participation in face-to-face meetings. That is something that is sometimes a bit difficult for smaller companies, but this is how we so far have been so successful. And I dare to say we are one of the most successful standards organizations that exists. Our output is very high, and also to which of these standards are then finally implemented into products that are sold on the market is a very big ratio that to my understanding, hardly any other organization of that size can meet. So you have to come to the meeting, you have to throw in your contributions, you have to be proactive. If you just sit, you need to go to the microphone, you need to make your voice the driving force. Organization, I will come. There's still an old number, sorry for that, company, so it's 700 companies now. So we have all the major telecommunication companies, network, device, and chipset vendors, but now we also have the vendors. So really the whole ecosystem that is, and I already told you that. So let's go to the next page, and there we see this concept of the 3 stages that we have. So the standards that we do, we start, this is the view from SA and CT. RAN does it a bit different, but in general, the processes everywhere the same. So first of all, when an idea comes up for a new feature, for a new service, whatever, and you define this really how talk about the radio impacts and so on. And once you need from this service, this stage 1, as we call it, is completed, and it goes down to the stage 2 working groups where we do practically the architecture. So this is SA2, and SA2 from SA is really the central group where everything gets together and where also the most people participate. We also do in parallel the security, handle the security issues, media related issues, operation and maintenance, charging, and then for the applications and mission critical, as I say, 6 has a very specific later as well. And then finally, once the architecture is done, practically when we say, okay, these are the boxes in the network that should fulfill a certain responsibility or a specific task, this is trickling down to the protocols and coding working groups, so the CT groups that do the stage 3. And they really define now the bits and bytes of what is going either over the cable or in our case, mostly over the air. So this is something you have to have in mind when you start working with 3GPP. If you go to a stage 2 group with a new idea and develop, well, do we really need that? And a very easy way to reject your idea is to say, well, first go to off with new ideas in SA1. If you want to one for you where the work is handled. We also do releases in different work item is something that should end up in a normative text in a standard. Then we do start in parallel the stage 2 studies to the stage 2 work items, and the same on stage 3. And then we have a stage 3 freeze, which is coincidence freeze. So that is the one where we say, okay, the release is closed. Very anything anymore. 3 months later is the code starting and go is extremely successful. It gives us clear timelines. It gives us the possibility to prioritize our work and so on. So this is a ritual we try to strictly follow. We cannot always do it for all the work items that we have at the table, but it's quite powerful, and it makes clear that you start with an idea that is maybe big. For example, you want all the cars in the world to communicate via the wireless network, via the 3GPP network. And then you say, well, this is too big for one release. So you go into a phased approach. You start with a very initial part where you create the basics in one release, and then in the next release you enhance. And this is healthy because you gain experience not only in standards, but also from the products that you deploy. So this iterative circle or iterative process is in fact something that we have seen in the past. Gives 3GPP a lot of experience feedback from reality and makes our standards more stable. And then inside the releases, we do this work item. So a work item is really a specific area of work that is addressed during a release. It could be vehicle-to-vehicle communication. It could be satellite communication. It could be an enhancement of edge computing, an enhancement of network slicing, and so on. So you can think of once we have a scope for something, we put it into a work item. Once we have agreed that we go forward with that work in this release. And it's usually specific to a single working group in a specific release. I will not go further into these, see some of them later on. And then once you have a work item established, then you need to change the specifications, and it's by needs of What's to say is a way of changing existing specifications, either to enhance them with new features or to do corrections or modifications to existing features. Then again, some statistics. So you see, like in what was 2017, I guess we had about 8,000 CRs. We have more and more every year. It's going up with the 5G work. Sorry, yes. Okay. And now with the COVID-19 situation, is there anybody trying to say something? You hear me? So I think it should be defined, and it's just unnumbered areas. So you have 24229, for example, which is the specification of IMS on protocol level, just as an example. So this numbering is sometimes a bit mysterious. There's a lot of mysterious stuff in 3GPP to newcomers. This is trying to do this here. You have an overview of the numbering. Leave it as it is. I will then working procedures, but I want to emphasize right here the summary of the release content, TR 21915 and 21916. They are really very useful specs, and I can only invite you to have a look into them. They show you very clearly what we did on the different levels for release 15 and 16, and those are the two releases where we started to work on 5G. Some abbreviations. Then we also have a mentoring process established now. Practically, we have a mailing list where you can subscribe to if you're a 3GPP member, and then you can ask questions. We started this practically in September last year. It needed a bit of time to kick off, and yeah, once we had our mentors in place, Corona crisis hit. So the idea is, of course, mostly at face-to-face meetings, that people, newcomers and the mentors get together, have a chat, that questions can be asked openly, because lots of people, not only newcomers, but also experienced delegates that are working for long in a specific working group, they have still a lot of questions about issues going on in other working groups, because these different working groups, they have different ways of handling issues. And there's not always total clarity of what is going on in different working groups, because it's so many people working in parallel. So having this mentoring should really be an open exchange where you can ask questions where you're sort of insecure about if they are appropriate to ask during a meeting, or where you think, well, everybody most likely knows that, just me doesn't know it. That's not the case. It's many people have questions. So this is a process we are establishing. You see a slide with the first round of mentors. We want, of course, more people to become mentors, and this will go on, especially once we are back in this. Quickly on the COVID-19 impact. So what we did since quarter one now in 2020 is we canceled all the 3GPP face-to-face meetings, including the plenary and the current planning is that there will be no face-to-face meetings in 2020 at all. I mean, there might be that the December plenary can be, and if miracles happen, yes, of course, it could also be that in November the working groups face-to-face situation and give really need all of any country to without and could participate in a meeting in a room where there are up to 300 or 400 people are gathering. So we fell back on e-meetings. E-meetings is a concept we have already in 3GPP, but we are not very much familiar with. Now we have had consecutively in most of the working groups already 3-4 e-meetings. It's going well. The output, I have to say, is very stable. It's really good output. People are happy to approve it into standards. But of course, the number of contributions has gone down. So the output is lower now. And the e-meetings also cost considerably more time. So we have to be aware of that. It's improving. We are learning a lot, and we're improving our tool landscape and the rules for e-meetings. So it's going up by and by, but we have to be aware that the full output that we usually have will be back in once we have face-to-face meetings again. And for the moment, in this first half year, we focused on the completion of release 16. I will come to that later on as well. And then a 5G overview. So that is something where I just want to establish a very initial message about what 5G is in 3GPP standards. So yeah, this will not go into much detail. So my view on that is what we do with 5G, we build 2 skyscrapers. And the one is the smartphone evolution. That is the part that we do since 3GPP was founded, or even before that, where we have the users that have the smartphones in their hand, and we provide them better quality services, more bandwidth, and so on, better security. That is the stuff we are really, really good in doing. We have lots of experience. So from a presentations point of view, that's pretty boring because I cannot tell you much exciting stuff about that. You are aware what you want from your smartphone in the future. But then we have this service enabling revolution, and that is the second skyscraper, and that is new. That's the new thing we do in 5G. At least we did some service enabling already in 4G in LTE Advanced Pro. But 5G is really putting this in the center. And you have to be aware that these 2 things are sort of going on in parallel. They're overlapping heavily, but these are the 2 ideas. So 5G, and I will now mainly service enabling revolution, as I called it. First of all, to give these industries by themselves, like the autonomous cars, the factories, the ships, and so on, as a closed system, the possibility to communicate either with the network or amongst each other. But then, of course, also we have a wider scope to say we want to integrate the services as much as possible. We look for service harmonization and bring these things together so that not only the cars communicate amongst each other, but that is a complete ecosystem where services fit into each other, and something that comes out from a 5G based factory go into transport on the road, on a ship, and so on, all with a service that is constructed on 5G. So we have this triangle that was at the very beginning when we set out to do 5G, where you see the different industries and the technicalities that we need for that. So enhanced mobile broadband, massive machine type communications, and ultra reliable and low latency communications. These are the cornerstones. And when we talk about 5G now, a very simple approach to thinking about how we did our work is that in release 15 and 16, when we started with 5G, we did these cornerstones: MBB, IoT, and URLLC. These are the technologies that we invested in. And what we are going now to is in release 17 and 18 and further on, is we're looking into this triangle and really filling the area. We're looking into the issues where it's overlapping, where there are commonalities and harmonization. And on the right side, you see an overview on what requirements these different vertical industries have. And all of them that you see there, we already cover. Maybe not to the full extent that they need. Like look at the industrial, at the factories, for example, we give them a certain set of services already, but there are more requirements that will come on in later releases. But basically everything that comes from vertical industries has already a foot in the 3GPP standards in releases 15, 16, and 17. And for us in 3GPP, that really means that we completely redesigned our network and our thinking. We went from practically mobile communication centric point of view, from the serving a smartphone user, serving a single user who is mobile in the world, into the idea to be a service enabling platform. So a flexible enabler. And all our ideas that we had about the work, about the network, about the radio and so on, they had to change. And this I tried to summarize here. So what we end up, is a network that you see here in the center that is completely virtualized. So the hardware is an abstraction layer, but we use virtualization technologies to instantiate all our entities in the network. And then the network itself, it can be, we say, call it slicing, so it can be used into logic on, can a complete, for example, we have so the public services. So you could, for example, say the police in a country needs its own network. Well, they don't need to build up the hardware, the connections, and so on. They can go to an operator, and the operator can give them a logical network with guaranteed resources that run in the very same way as 5G networks all over the world, that provides specific services that are specific for mission critical or for public safety requirements. And that can be extended, that can be grown, and so on. That can be interconnected with other networks absolutely in the same way as every other network, every other 5G network. You see on the left side a number of icons, what devices or industries we try to connect. This is just like a very simple showing. On the left side, you see the one thing I want to emphasize is 5G is not something that is standalone. We will always integrate communication with legacy systems like LTE, 4G, but also, of course, we will always have the possibility to break out into the internet, or interconnecting enterprise services, obviously with different service levels than we have defined for 5G. But then on the top, and that is one thing that I see that people tend to forget when they're presenting 5G, is that we completely opened up our core network with application programming interfaces. And that's really something completely new to us. So the vertical industries, the third-party service providers, they can get information from the operator via open interfaces that are clearly defined, that are fully optimized, that are based on RESTful technologies, which are defined by IETF and the W3C, and which are common all over the web. So we're really settled there for very clear and open interfaces that allow industries to build their own services on top of our network. Right, so the cross-industry service harmonization, that is something that I quickly mentioned already. So I take just one example here. We have a work item in release 70 now that's called SiteLink in RAN and PROSI proximity services in SA. It's the same, it's just two different names for whatever reason. And this is something that was triggered initially by the mission critical services. So practically they said, well, you're in a disaster area, take Fukushima several years ago, where there's no network working anymore, but still I want the same services that I have usually on the network by means of device-to-device communication. So I want the 5G services more or less in the same way as I have them, device-to-device without the network in between. And we designed that. And that is what we call then device-to-device communication for mission criticals of network. But the same technology is used for communication between cars, for communication between stacked containers who cannot reach the network, for audio and video distribution, for example, in concerts. So the same technology can be used for this, for these very, very different applications. And that means that obviously these industries are going together closer. They're moving together closer because they're using the same technology. The chipset vendors will only provide a single sort of chipset for these different industries. So there is a lot of potential of service harmonization for companies that look into applications that go across different industries. And now to verticals and 3GPP. So in September, we had a sort of a survey in SA Plenary, and we asked people to indicate what they would think about their own company. Is it a vertical? Is it an operator? Or is it a vendor? Vendor can be network vendor, chipset, handset vendor. We didn't care. And what we see here in the lower part are the companies that said, well, we are a vendor. Then in the middle part, it's the companies that said we are operators. And then on top, you see the verticals. And it shows that we are now in 3GPP already after a few years now at a level where there is a sort of equal distribution between these three camps. And that is very healthy for us. So we really hear the voice of the verticals, and we really try to integrate your needs. So I will jump over a number of slides now in order to speed up a bit, because I see I used already quite a lot of time. One thing I want to make sure is that a vertical industry or a vertical player that comes to 3GPP should be aware that she or he, the person, the delegate, or also the company, is not alone. And the most important thing in standards is communication. Communication with the other devs in the room of industries, but also communication within the industry. Together, we are in an organization, so AA. And 5GAA looks at 3GPP standards and tries to find ways tries to find features that they want from these standards in order to improve for the car industry. So they're doing practically sort of coordination work amongst the car manufacturers. And then once they have agreed on something, they bring this to 3GPP. Then, of course, they have to discuss with the other people in the room, but they already have gained a sort of common understanding. And I can only say for most of the industries that I see, this initial step coordinating with your competitors is the most painful and most time-consuming task that people have, because most of the industries are not used to doing standards on that level. So you have a few standards in cars, you have a few standards in satellites and in factories, but mostly things are proprietary. And now you need to sit together with your competitor and agree on a way forward, on prioritization of features and so on. That is extremely challenging, and people need to get used to that. There is no way around this, but it's something you need to be aware of, that this is really the big challenge. Then once you're in the 3GPP room, you will very quickly find out that there are people who support your tasks or your ideas, and you will get up with them. So there is, and we also now used to accommodate newcomers. So we're trying to give you a bit of better guidance. So I think once you are in the 3GPP room, things should run a bit more smoothly. So, and then we come to the releases. So as I said, these skyscrapers that we said in the beginning, this whole 5G endeavor, that was started with release 15. What we had before were dreams, hopes, visions. When you went to a conference 4 or 5 years ago, people told you everything about 5G, and it did practically whatever you wanted. Last years is that we nailed down in release 15 and 16 very clearly what is 5G. So we set the borders, we made it clear what's in and also obviously what's out. We have first rollouts now already in settings that we call non-standalone, where practically the core network is still 4G, but the radio is 5G. But then with release 16, we hope to come very soon to rollouts where we have also the core network 5G. Once the core network is 5G, it fully enables the vertical services. The non-standalone rollout, the 5G radio only, is more for the smartphone users, or with a focus on the smartphone users to give them better services and bandwidth. But the vertical revolution should go with the standalone full 5G rollout. Now we're practically at the end of release 16. We will finish it hopefully now in June, or not only hopefully, we will finish it in June. And now we go on. So 5G isn't closed, 5G isn't finished. This is an iterative process. So we now in release 17, we get experience from the rollouts and we try to work them into our standards. And then we have already release 18 started and so on. So what we did is really, we came from this whole vision part into something where you have industrial applications, service harmonization. We connect the planet. I mean, that's obvious that this will be an ubiquitous platform that will be available everywhere. And well, we are on the way, and everybody who wants to join us in this work is very welcome, and we are happy to hear your voice. Here I give an example of the 3GPP process for the mission criticals, where you see how this iterative process works. So we started with release 13 with a single service mission critical push to talk, and then over the releases 14, 15, 16, 17, and now even 18, we extended this, and every release got more and more functionality. So shift the scope from LTE to 5G. This you see on the top. What is if you come to 3G, you have to be prepared to send your delegates not only for 1 year, not only for or not only for one release, but you have to see this as a continuous thing that moves forward, where the network itself evolves, where you will get a lot of new inspiration and ideas and motivations to enhance your services. So this is an ongoing process for all the industries, and it's good to see that things not just suddenly stop, but really evolve into the future. Here's the time plan that we are currently working on. So as I said, this line here in 2020 is where we, well, 620, that's practically where we are now. So where we are freezing release 16 and the release 16 coding now. And we did the release 17 stage 1 already, so this has finished. But now we're in the middle of release 17 work in stage 2. And this is really ongoing full speed. So one thing from this timeline to understand is release 16 is finished. There's no way to really put anything in there. Release 17, the content has been clearly defined. There is also no gap anymore where you can quickly get in a new service. If you focus on new services, you have to start thinking of release 18. So finishing time of release 17 will be around 2021, so September 2021. With the COVID situation, this timeline might change. It might be later. We don't know yet. For release 18, we didn't agree a timeline now, but you can imagine that it's like 15 months after that, maybe even longer. So you see there is quite some process needed and some time needed before you get your idea through standards. I think I will go over the next stuff quite quickly. So release 16, yes, we do this. We freeze it now in the 2020 plenary, in the June 2020 plenary. Release 17, the work on the SA1 has. We did the prioritization. Have a time announcements that we will give you with 17. It's content highlight, I called it, and there is two columns that you have to see here. So the one side is the enhancement, the continuous enhancement of the core, building up the radio network, bringing better functionality in the base system. But then we also have a lot of new features that are mostly related to the verticals. I already talked about the proximity services or side link. We have multicast and broadcast services. We integrate satellites, which is a huge step, industrial IoT, and so on and so on. So this gives you a very quick overview on where we are in release 17. These are the main focus areas that we have. We work on all of them in parallel, and we will finish them in time, as I showed before. Here's a longer list then of the work items that we had, that we have in release 17. I will not go through them in detail, but I think they might be useful for you later on. And then in release 18, we just started. So there we have no timeline yet, so we don't know the freezing dates. So this is really in the, I would say, brainstorming phase. So if you have new ideas, the time is now to contribute them to release 18. Once we have done the prioritization, I guess around about half a year, maybe 1 year, release 18 will also be closed. So then you go to release 19 with new ideas. All right, so summary is the COVID situation impacts us. We do everything in e-meetings. Release 16 will be frozen now in this month, end of this month. Release 17 is really the release where the technical work is going on now, and where you can contribute on architecture and protocol level. New ideas should go in release 18, and the key steps for verticals is to coordinate amongst each other. First of all, as I said before, this painful process, and with other players, provide the necessary resources to standards. You really have to send a number of delegates in order to get your voices heard, and be prepared that your improvements will be gradual from release to release. You will not resolve your idea right at this moment in one release. You will need several releases. We need to be in a conversation, especially with the verticals, but also other companies, And this is ongoing process that we are very willing to perform. Is we're very much relying on your view on how is work in 3GPP. What can we improve? How can we serve you better? How can we avoid discrepancies and so on? So we hope that you're open to us and you give us information, give information to the chairman or the other officials in a group, tell them what is good, where you have problems, and that we find maybe common ways forward to improve our work. And with that, we go to questions and answers. So thank you very much for your attention. And I'm very sorry I took so long, but we already said in the beginning, I guess we could go a bit over time. So let's see. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine, Georg. I think it was a very comprehensive presentation. Now, can we take some questions we have in the question box? So I can read out. The first question is from Bindu from TSDSI. What work especially happening in smart grids and smart metering?
Sorry.
Could you hear?
I heard the question. I was for a moment on mute to
drink a
sip of coffee. So that's the work on NB-IoT mostly. So smart metering and the grid. So if we go to metering, we have our own protocol that we defined, NB-IoT, narrowband IoT, that we also did already for LTE. And I just try to find the slide where I at least mentioned it here. So we have narrowband IoT or LTE-M. These are two different technologies based on what requirements you have. And those are radio access technologies that we provide, that operators roll out in many countries. But mostly what this is are radio technologies, right? So this is something where you practically can connect your device, your smart meter that you maybe built with the 3GPP network and can let it communicate with an application that you have in your office, in your company, and so on. What we don't provide at this moment, at least, are native services specifically for smart metering. So we provide you the access, we provide you an API that lets you read all the information that you need. That is there, but beyond that, we only look at these services when we go into specific industries. For example, manufacturing. When you look at a factory where we have, for example, specifications for devices for meters that need actually ultra low latency, then we provide these specific services. So this is in our focus since release 13. So it's something that is practically there. The question is more for your specific country, is your operator rolling out the service? And is the operator interested? There is, of course, a lot of competition in that field. There's LoRa, Sigfox, and so on. One thing we are doing now, and that is something on the RAN side. So I said already, I'm not a radio person, but one extremely cool thing, at least I think so, what we're doing now is on the RAN side, is we're looking at this NB-IoT and studying at the moment. So we're not developing a solution already now, but we are studying whether it could be handled also from satellites, so that your device could, in theory, communicate via satellite with the 5G network and wouldn't need to be in an area where 5G coverage is provided terrestrially. But this is at the very, very starting point. It's a study. On the other hand, it shows that's exactly what standards is. If you're asking this question, maybe you're interested in that, please come to us, tell us your requirements, your ideas. Now we are starting with certain issues, the satellite NB-IoT issue. Bring your views in and we will integrate them.
Okay. Thank you, George. Now there's another question from same person. Which vertical industries have engaged deeply till now with 3GPP?
So we started with the mission criticals, so the public safety services. They were sort of the kickstarting of the whole idea. The working with the mission critical industry was sort of easy for us. It was complicated. Everything was complicated in the beginning because for 3GPP it was all new and we needed new processes and new working group and so on. But mission critical services are about telecommunication already. You want the policeman to talk to the fireman via walkie-talkie service that is provided via 5G. So they have sort of a concept of what telecommunication is. But from that on, that was sort of release 13. We invited more and more industries. So, and not, well, we invited all industries, but more and more industries then came. Next one was, for example, the car manufacturers. So 5G AA, as I said before. Lots of car manufacturers sent delegates to the different organizations, but they also talk with the operators and the vendors offline, outside 3GPP, and say, please, for the solutions we have in mind, also keep them in mind. Keep them in mind when you do standards. So this is not only in 3GPP, but also outside. And then we have the factories, so the manufacturing. We have the railways, the whole, as I said before, the smart metering, healthcare, and so on. That's there, yes, but it's more under the hood of automotive, manufacturing, and so on. For the drone services, also we have a number of companies in there, and then I try to go here. Yeah, there you see a number of companies on the top, of course. So there's, for example, also audio video production services, and then the broadcasting companies like BBC or in German broadcasters attending. And then what we also did was we put the whole satellite industry under the umbrella of verticals. And they were happy to do so, actually. That is because they are new to 3GPP and they have very dedicated requirements. They're maybe not ad hoc seen as a vertical industry, but they are treated like that in 3GPP, which gives them a certain, I would say, advantage. Then we have some healthcare companies, but for healthcare, I would say we are at the beginning and we would need a bit more of input. So yes, mission critical, automotive, manufacturing / factories, satellites, broadcasters, those are the ones that really are there in full beauty and deeply changing our infrastructure and developing services with us.
Okay. So next question is, of course, it is about RAN. It is from Mr. Abhijit from Civit. He is asking how stage 1, 2, and 3 work decided in RAN group.
So in RAN groups.
Yeah, RAN groups.
In RAN groups, so RAN groups are, I mean, everywhere you have a process, there's somebody who does it differently. And in our case, it's the RAN groups, which is fine and which is extremely successful. What they are doing is when they set out new ideas, they collect these ideas. I do this now very roughly, right? Then they have like either a quarter or half a year email discussions where they condense more and more and more these ideas into work items. And once they have the work items fleshed out, or study items actually fleshed out, so that it's clear what should be the scope of this specific work in this specific release, what should be the scope on satellites, for example, in release 17, once this has been clearly stated on like 2 or 3 pages, there's a prioritization process, because usually we have much too much work on the table for a release. and then they do a prioritization. And once the prioritization is done, this is going on in parallel with SA. So we have a similar process in SA where we have the work items at the table, and then we prioritize them, and then we look at each other, SA and run, and say, well, do we really have the same scope, or at least where we overlap, do we have the same scope? And once this is all evened out, then we know what's in the release. And then we can start with, usually the stage one at this point is already done. Then we do the architecture work in specific groups, security in a different group. And then we have other groups that do the stage three. That is the same in run. I hope this sort of gave an overview. But you can also ask, I think Balázs is also giving a presentation in this series. So I encourage you to ask him, because he, of course, is the master of this process for run.
Okay, so we have maybe one or two more questions. One is from Dimitri Martinez. The question is, any views on how what we are discussing today will apply to 6G era? Do we anticipate this 6G will appear on the agenda soon?
So first of all, in 3GPP, there's hardly, I mean, if you look at the contributions, there's no talk about 6G. And of course, it's going on in the research institutes, and we are discussing it. I cannot tell you when we will start with headlines that are named 6G. One thing we know is that for 3G, 4G, 5G, it always took 10 years to introduce a new, not to introduce, but after 10 years, we started a new generation. So 10 years after 3G started, we started with 4G, and 10 years later, we started with 5G. That gives a hint, but I'm personally not so sure if that is really the idea we should follow, because what we do now is we have all these new companies, and we have companies like the railways, the satellites, and so on. They practically put their hopes now into 5G. So if we come in 5 years and say, well, now we go into a different technology and we do 6G, there is quite a danger that we disappoint these companies, because their product life cycles are so extremely long. If you talk with a person from the railways, they will tell you, well, I need this device that I built today, I need this to be available at the market in 30 years. And that is something that at least we from the smartphone industry are not so used to. What we did in 4G, for example, when new technologies came up, we created LTE Advanced and then LTE Advanced Pro. So we tried to integrate these new technologies, IoT, mission critical, and so on, under the hood of the 4G at that time. And then once we had a critical mass, we went to the new 5G. And I could foresee something like that with 6G. Currently, everybody calls it 6G. It's cool, it's wow, it's futuristic, it's a vision and whatever. In the end, when it all sort of comes down to reality, we might see that actually what 6G is about can be seen as an extension to the 5G ecosystem. And that would give us a way in the future in standards to develop that. But that is, honestly, this is not even the view of my company, or this is not the view of 3GPP or anything. This is just something that I could envision what 5G turns out to be in standards. We have to be patient, and we have to see how things go forward.
Yeah, thanks, George. So we will take now, because we have already overshot time by about 10 minutes. We have another 5 minutes, and we can take two questions. So next question is from Mr. Jagdeep. What security enhancements have been done in 5G release 16?
16.
Release 16, 1.6, yeah. Yeah.
So give me a sec. No, I don't have them listed here. So practically release 15 and 16 have to be understood as something that goes hand in hand. So 15 was practically mostly on the run side and an initiation of the core network. On release 16, we then focused on the end-to-end system. We enhanced the 4G security so that it's backwards compatible with, so that 5G is backwards compatible with the 4G technology, so that you have the security, so that you can authenticate and so on, so that all these interworking issues are clearly related. One bigger part that we did was the sort of a certification process that allows the different entities that we did hand in hand with GSMA, the different entities to be certified from a certain security level. That was a sort of a big chunk of work that was done by SA3. Then, of course, we looked into the whole securing the new technologies for the vertical industries, how to secure the device-to-device communication and so on. But now one of the issues we have still on the agenda, and which will be sort of exciting, I guess, in the upcoming few weeks, is whether we have user plane integrity protection. That will be is something that we are still discussing. So, but in general, security is always going hand in hand with the features we define. When we go to requirements, we hardly ever have like a work item on the requirements level that says this is only security. So once you start a work item, we also handle the security. So for all the issues you have seen, we are treated now, the virtualization, the slicing, the edge computing, and so on. Also the related security work items have been done. Okay. I don't hear you. Are you not sure?
Sorry, I was on mute, sorry.
No,
sorry,
no problem, no problem.
So the last question of the day is interoperability of MC services is need of the time. What is the progress so far? And what about to tackle pandemic in mission critical services?
So on the first one, that is actually, this is a very good question, because this is a huge challenge. It was a huge challenge for us because we practically, especially mission critical push to talk, which is the service which is deployed all over the world, more or less, in a sort of proprietary fashion in most of the countries, or based on legacy standards like Tetra in Europe. They're all there. And usually a country, when it decides to go for the new service, for the 5G based mission critical services, they don't extinguish their existing system, but they want to have a interoperability between these two types of services. What I say here is not only specific for mission critical. It's the same for all the industries. Usually you have already technology in place and you want interworking. So what we defined is an interface from, first of all, of course, we defined the normal mission critical 5G service, standalone on its own. And then we defined from all these entities an interface to a gateway function where we clearly listed all the functionalities in 5G that are available, and the gateway can handle them. But then the gateway, the other side of the gateway from 3GPP side, we left unspecified. So now we have activities in North America, in Europe, where the specific standards are standards organizations that did the legacy systems. They are now defining the other side of that gateway for their specific technology. So that is all on the way. If you have a specific technology, you can take the gateway specification from 3GPP, which shows you on every level what services we are providing, and whatever you have as well. You should be able to define an interworking. This gateway specification can also be extended. So if you see a need for more services, you should come to 3GPP and ask for them so that we can interwork them. And then on the pandemic, yeah, sure. I mean, sort of, that's of course standards. Once we start working, it takes a long, long while until things come into the marketplace. What we see is the mobile networks worked over the pandemic, or still working over the pandemic. So I think they gave many people good access and good communication with their companies, with their loved ones. They gave us the means to make this pandemic sort of, well, I don't want to say we handled it, but to handle it the way we do now at the moment. We have no specific work items on this issue, at least not now. I know that in some countries there are discussions how mobile networks could be extended to better serve related services, but this has not hit 3GPP yet. You have to see this. If such issues pop up in 3GPP, they most likely will be government driven. And governments usually take a good while before they make a proposal to standards, because they want to be absolutely sure that what they tell us is really what they need and what is agreeable also for them. So I would say we will definitely, not definitely, but I assume we will get work items on this issue, maybe in release 18, latest by release 19. And yeah, that's at least what I hope. Thank you.
Okay, so that was the last question of the day we had, and so just to audience, I want to say that you had the opportunity to hear this wonderful webinar and a lot of information from Jörg about 3GPP functioning standards, and the answers to the questions which were given or clarify how 3GPP is open to taking up new work on the suggestions from members and industry, and how the collaboration with industry actually drives the work which is a need of the hour for public use. So we hope that today's webinar has clarified a lot of things about the working of 3GPP and how Services and Architecture Group is working for next generation of 5G or whatever we may call. So thank you very much, George, for this wonderful webinar. And now I
Thank you very much,
Sachin for thank you for closing remarks.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity and for the questions and your attention.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Mittal. Thank you, Jörg. Dankeschön. In fact, we overspent 17 minutes. So I'm grateful to all of you, to people who are at the listening end, people who are at the speaking end, both Mr. Mittal and Jörg. And I hope that it will generate more interest, in India in regards to 3GPP, and active participation in 3GPP. And with your permission, I don't know if you have updated your slides or the ones that you shared with us were the same, that if we can share it with the people.
Yes, so I didn't update them. You saw a few numbers were maybe not 100% correct, but I think that should be okay. So please feel free to share them, and that's the intention of them. Thank you.
Yeah, and also for everyone, the session was recorded. I understand that for some of you, the line was patchy, and I hope in the recording, you will be able to better refer the content, and especially when we have the slides from York. So hopefully it will be useful for all of you. And with that, I thank all of you again, and we look forward for our next webinar. So next webinar is with the colleague of York, Balash, which I believe is on 24th, but we have one more webinar before that, which is with Lionel, and that is on 19th of June. We just agreed today, and I think he's looking at the group which you were chairing before.
That is correct, yeah. CT. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Yeah, thank you.